Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Mental Health Commission of Canada's webinar series on integrating psychological health and safety in the workplace. Today's webinar topic is School is In, Helping Those Who Educate. My name is Tina Corey. I'm a program manager on the workplace team with the Mental Health Commission of Canada, and I have the pleasure of introducing today's webinar and our speakers. Just before we get started, I wanted to go through a few housekeeping items. I just wanted to invite you to send any questions or comments using the chat feature, which can be found on your screen. If you don't see it, just look in the right-hand corner for the little bubble that says chat, and open that window, and it will pop up on the right-hand side of your screen. We encourage you, when you send your questions, please use the drop-down menu and select all panelists. So the questions go to myself as well as the presenter, and I'll ask them on your behalf. If you'd like to send a question to the host anonymously, just please check the host in the drop-down function and send that to us. Also, the webinar is being recorded, and it will be posted on the Commission's website in the webinar archive sections following the presentation in approximately 2 weeks. And due to the large number of participants, we've muted all your phone lines just to eliminate any background noise. It's my pleasure to introduce you to our speakers for today's webinar. Our host is Nitika Rurari, Manager, Research Evaluation and Knowledge Translation, Workplace Mental Health with the Mental Health Commission of Canada. We also had a change in our program and regret to inform you that Bill Gartland from the Catholic District School Board of Eastern Ontario is unable to join us today. Instead, I'd like to welcome Janet Hicks, who is the Senior Manager, HR Services with the York Region District School Board. Janet has worked in the area of human resources for over 25 years, both within the public and private sectors. Throughout her career, Janet has passionately advocated for employee physical and mental well-being. So with that said, over to you, Nitika, to get us started.
Thank you so much, Tina. And once again, it is really my pleasure to be talking about this important topic of mental health in the workplace, but in the education sector. So just to kind of give you an outline of what we will be discussing today, we'll talk about what mental health of workers in school means to us and what we're trying to convey here, followed by a bit of a discussion by the York Region District School Board by Janet to discuss what they've done, why was this topic important to them, how have they addressed mental health of their workers in their school board, and what have they done to promote mental health in their environment, their journey as well as some of the impact or effect that they're seeing based on their actions, and some of the next steps. What are they wanting to do next? Hoping that this will lead to a great question and answer period, either for myself or for Janet, and as Tina highlighted, you can always use the chat function to ask us your questions. So moving right along, a famous writer and professor once wrote that the most valuable asset of the 21st century is the individuals and will be the knowledge workers and their productivity. So keeping that in mind, and keeping in mind that individuals really are the producing entities in our economy today, we need to ensure that their health and their safety is safeguarded in all workplaces. And we also know that there is no health without mental health. So why do we want to focus on mental health in the workplace? We know that workplaces play a key role in promoting mental health and preventing mental injury of their employers across all sectors. And this is especially true in the education sector, where teachers, administrative staff are not only dealing with their own mental health problems and work stresses, but also interact with students at the same time. And we know that students bring their own mental health challenges as well as their own concerns to the school environment as well. We know that the health or harm created in workplaces can migrate not only to families, communities, and society as a whole, and can have a great impact in an individual's quality of life. So in addition to sort of the role teachers play, let's focus on teachers for just a couple of seconds. We've heard that in Ontario, 13% of teachers report being stressed all the time. And this is in comparison to 7% of the general public. We also know that in 2010, over 60% of teachers in Ontario identified work as their main source of stress. 42% of all disability claims in the education sector in Ontario stem from mental health disorders, of which 52% are constituted as depression. And we also know that nearly half of all teachers leave their job within the first 5 years, many feeling that they were not given the right tools they needed to succeed on their job in general. But that's not what we're focusing only on. We don't say that education sector either consists only of students or teachers. We know that there are staff included within the education sector. And when we talk about addressing mental health in the workplace, we are speaking to custodian staff, administration, and all inclusive. We also know that these days there are various types of employments that we can find in the education sector. Full-time work, but also precarious work. We know that precarious work in our sense leads to contract work, sub-teachers, and all of those that have a lot of insecurity, job insecurity tied in to the main roles that they're performing. According to a recent study done by PEPSO, which looked at about 4,000 workers between the ages of 25 and 65, over 80 interviews were done with workers in precarious employment living in the Toronto area and Hamilton area. We found that those stats reveal a high level of mental stress as well as mental health concerns in that population. We found that precarious workers are twice as likely as those in stable jobs to report having mental health problems. And they were 6 times more likely to delay starting a relationship because of a job uncertainty. I already mentioned mental health concerns happening during workplaces migrate to your families. They are also 3 times more likely to delay having kids. And almost half of precarious workers found in the study say that their employment situation does disrupt their family life. So what does it mean for employers? It means that the cost of doing nothing leads to high costs in absenteeism, low presenteeism rates, which essentially means lack of productivity of an individual who is at work, high costs in disability claims, high instances of injuries and workplace illnesses, as well as grievances and complaints, high turnover, as well as legal implications. When taking a closer look at disability claims within the sector, stats have become even more apparent. According to the Association of Workers' Compensation Board of Canada, between 2012 and 2014, we know that there were over 20,000 lost claims processed in the education sector in Canada alone. With that, it would be my pleasure to introduce you to Janet Hicks, who really will shed some light on how we can address workplace mental health in an environment, in an education environment that really does need the help and also is most appropriate to help, because these are educators and administrators that are forming the next generation for us. So I would love to introduce Janet now, and over to you, Janet.
Great, thanks so much. And I just want to say welcome to everyone who took the time today to join this session. We're really excited to share some of the work we're doing here in York Region District School Board. Next. Just to begin, I'm going to tell you a little bit about the school board. We are the largest employer in York Region. We're the 3rd largest school district in Ontario. We have over 122,000 students in 174 elementary schools and 32 secondary schools. We have over 200 unique work locations, so that would include our schools and our education centers. We have over 15,000 employees, And we work with a number of unions and federations, including Elementary Teachers Federation, both permanent and occasional, our OSSTF, which is our secondary school teachers, our QP 1734, which looks after our educational assistants, our secretaries, and QP 1196, which would be our maintenance and caretaking employees, and OPSU, which is some of our second language instructors, and we also have a non-union group as well. Next.
Janet, I feel that some individuals might be having a hard time hearing your voice. I'm not sure if it's the connection issue, but maybe we can try louder. I'm not sure if that will rectify anything, but just wanted to highlight that for you.
Okay, does that sound better? I'll try to move the mic right in front of my face.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So in terms of some of our organizational challenges, we are publicly funded, and so we don't have the ability to raise funds. And the money that we receive from the ministry is generally earmarked for specific programs. We're very decentralized. As I mentioned, we have over 200 work locations. We have different sized work locations. So some of our schools would have staff members totaling 100 or maybe exceeding 100, where some of our small work locations may have a staff of 10. We are very highly unionized, which we value our partnerships with our unions. However, sometimes there can be significant challenges, particularly when you look at this past year in the education sector and the provincial bargaining and a number of the obstacles that the province and the school boards went through. Schools are not necessarily viewed as a workplace by many of our employees. So we've been at this a number of years now, and when we really first started, teachers in particular they would talk about their schools as schools and really thinking about their students, but we had to, I guess, work with their mindset to help them to understand, that school is still their workplace. We have communication barriers, as you can imagine, with 200 work locations. We're extremely busy and bombarded like everyone else with emails. And we have limited training opportunities. For us, we don't necessarily receive funding for training. And to teach trainers or educational assistants or principals, we have to release them, and we would have to have supply coverage brought in. And that is a huge expense, and without the ministry providing the funding, there's no way to do that, to have training opportunities held in the daytime during normal instruction hours. Next. I just at a high level to speak about, so you can see sort of the connection within our board in terms of well-being, both student and staff well-being and mental health. So our board focuses on student achievement and well-being. The concept of student and staff well-being is woven into the organization at all levels. You can see that there's references on this slide to the trustee multi-year plan, the director's annual plan, the board improvement plan, and from there, actually, all of our schools and departments are required to, I guess, personalize it and create a plan for their individual work location that fits into the board improvement plan. Next. Some might ask, why is there an interest in staff well-being? I would assume that most of you listening have already answered that question, but we believe that staff are our most valuable asset, and we believe we've hired the best, and we need the best to retain our staff. We need healthy staff to support student achievement and well-being. This includes both teaching and our support staff. In the education sector, though, I think we have something that's a little unique in that our staff model behavior for our students. And our learners can be, as young as 4 years old in the schools, and I think that they're really spending a lot of time, full-day kindergarten, for example, they're spending a lot of time with their teachers, with the educational assistants, with the admin and the support staff within the building, and they're seeing those folks. And I think there's a lot to be said about the modeling that our staff can do for our students. Next. We'll talk a little bit about our journey, and we've been at this a little while. So next. The first place we started was the needs assessments and trying to identify our opportunities. In early 2013, we piloted a combined application using Excellence Canada's Healthy Workplace and their mental health at work criteria. So I think they were in the midst of introducing the mental health at work. So we worked to develop a program that was based on those two components. We conducted 16 focus groups with 13 different employee groups. And from our review, we created a system-level action plan, which was to address some of the gaps that we identified through the self-assessment process. Next. one of the things that it took us a while to get, but now that we've got it down pat, I think it's an excellent source of information. And I encourage you all, if you're not yet able to do this, but to create an annual employee health update or a health report. So we do this every year, and we share this with our union leaders and our senior management. And the information that we look at includes information related to sick leave utilization, LTD claims, our WSIB data, our EAP usage, our disability management data. So we have a disability management program that services all of our employee groups. We look at our health claim data and our labor relations data. And I know that for anyone out there in school boards, I mean, we struggle with our systems. As a board, most of our money goes in, obviously, to the classroom. And so sometimes we're challenged with outdated systems. But it's taken us a while, but we have right now a pretty good handle on where we get our data and making sure that we're getting accurate, clean data, and we're comparing it year over year. So we've probably had this health update for approximately 12 years, and the data is used to help us set some of our programming goals and to determine priorities. Next, just in terms of a snapshot of some of the data, this is an LTD usage, and it shows you the claim diagnosis analysis. So it's just a snapshot, in time, of our entire LTD book of business with OTIP, the Ontario Teachers Insurance Plan. So it includes all of our groups that have LTD with the exception of our principals who are insured somewhere else. It shows you that in this particular time, our claims for mental nervous disorders were approximately 36%. This rate, though, can range anywhere from, mid-30s to over 40, and you heard earlier that OTIP provided some statistics that for their entire book provincially of business was 42%. For mental nervous disorders. Again, that becomes just part of our snapshot. So well-being at York Region District School Boards, the image on the left represents our model and our framework for student and staff well-being here at YRDSB. And we have a well-being steering committee which has representation from a number of areas, and you can see those identified as part of the puzzle pieces. We have caring and safe schools and workplaces. We have equity and inclusivity. We have eco-schools and workplaces, mental health and addiction, and I'm missing one. I think I said equity and inclusivity. So they're all there, the pieces, the 5 pieces. And what's really been key for us on that steering level is realizing there's a ton of work in a system our size that's going on that, it's going on out there. I mean, there's pockets of work being developed in schools, in departments, and I think that was really bringing all those pieces together and valuing that work, but also making sure that we're avoiding duplication and coordinating the work. And this framework here is under revision now because we align ourselves with a lot of the ministry work, and so as the ministry model changes, again, we change our models. The model on the right, though, is from Excellence Canada, and that specifically focuses on the healthy workplace, and that helps to align our work in terms of from a human resource perspective and working, again, with that large steering committee. Next. Again, the work continues to evolve in terms of the board's well-being steering committee, and earlier this month, the ministry just shared a new discussion document entitled Ontario's Well-Being Strategy for Education. So our Healthy Schools and Workplaces framework will align with the ministry strategy. So again, we continue to review that. And over the past number of years, we have created a number of Healthy Schools and Workplaces procedures that fit with a policy. So schools a number of years ago were required to have a healthy school policy. At that time, and it's got to be maybe 10 years, we took that policy and we said, we want to align not only our students but our staff. So we created a Healthy Schools and Workplaces policy. And over the last couple of years, we've really created a number of procedures. And a number of those procedures are written to address both the student and staff perspective. So we will have, actions related to students, actions related to staff. But having said that, some of our procedures are more specific, either focused on one group or the other. Next. Just bringing our conversation now to sort of show you what we've done at the local level. So I've talked sort of system-wide in terms of the director's plan, the trustees' plan, our board improvement plan, and then our school plans. So focusing on the school and departmental plans. For a number of years now, we had schools complete Healthy School Action Plans, and these were really student-focused and involved our curriculum staff working with our teachers and our students, but also supported by York Region Public Health. We have a great partnership with York Region Public Health where they provide resources to assist our schools in developing Healthy Schools Action Plans. what we've done in the last few years, as part of that process, they'll develop their plan, there will be a process review, and then at the end of the school year, there'll be a celebration. And over the last probably 5 years, we've really expanded those plans to include staff. And most recently, we've made sure that our action plan has areas for both student and staff. And I think that's where we found we've been more successful. Because we're an education system, we found our teachers were engaged in doing the work for students, but not necessarily for the staff or for themselves. So we've tried to support them through human resources, from a little bit of resourcing, to help them create plans that are not only affecting the students, but are also affecting themselves. Maybe, can you switch to the next one? You'll see a sample. This is under the Healthy Schools and Workplaces framework, and I apologize, it's a little difficult to see. But what this shows you is that Healthy Schools and Workplace framework, you can see there's specific strategies that are related. This example is mental health for both students and staff. So we've got staff only, staff and students only, and then both. And we've got it with learning and development, shared leadership, student and staff engagement, and social and physical environments and community partnerships. So the framework, the pillars are there, and then what we've tried to do is give schools ideas. So if the school picks mental health as their goal for the year, they can then fill out their action template using a lot of the information that we've gathered and given to them. We've also created these frameworks, so that's just an example of mental health, but there's also ones for healthy eating, physical activity, safe and inclusive workplaces. So we're really looking at the whole child and the whole staff member in terms of well-being. Okay, I'm just going to talk a little bit now about our York Region District School Board's mental health and addiction strategy. So school boards were required to create a mental health strategy, again, focused on students, and the province did provide some funding for a mental health lead on the student side. So what I'm going to share with you is just a little bit about our strategy and how we've incorporated it both for students and staff. So our mental health and addiction strategy identified 4 strategic priorities: reducing stigma, supporting understanding and building capacity, creating collaborative pathways, care pathways, and developing mentally healthy environments. The work of this was led by our mental health lead on the student side. So each of these priority areas had working groups assigned with representatives from a number of stakeholder groups. So not just folks within our system, but people from our community partners, there were students, there was staff, all different levels within those 4 working groups. And these groups identified work to be done to support the strategy, and I'm going to give you some examples of them shortly. Within those working groups, there were folks who focused on the student goals and the student outcomes, and there were folks who focused really on the staff side. So next. You can see where are you on the health continuum. We speak about mental health as opposed to mental illness, and we emphasize really supporting mental well-being and looking at the whole person. These two slides actually were printed on cards and were distributed to all employees when our mental health strategy was first launched. And I think that was the way we sort of got people talking and really talking about the mental health continuum, because when we started the conversation, we were noticing a lot of the discussion focused really on mental illness as opposed to mental health and mental well-being. Next. So in terms of the work being done by the strategic priority working groups, I just wanted to give you some examples. So the Reducing Stigma campaign was probably something that ended up being quite exciting for us. We developed a campaign last year, and it was launched just before the Mental Health Awareness Week. And the campaign entitled Notice, Listen, Connect. It really came from the idea of 2 high school students that were on the stigma reduction campaign. Posters were sent to schools just before the launch, really just with the words, notice, listen, connect. Nothing else was said, and the idea was, from the students' perspective, was to, just like what's going on. So we asked teachers to write those on the blackboard, within our staff rooms, on our hallways, within our admin buildings. So just those words were said, and then the following week there were posters were sent, and there was specific examples related to ideas. So the goal really was to encourage students and staff to notice what others were experiencing, to listen to others, and to connect. There was a wonderful, really short video that was produced at one of our schools, and it's entitled Just Notice, Listen, and Connect. And I noticed that the link has been included at the end of this presentation, and I hope you find the time to watch it. It's really excellent. It's very short. but it really gets the point across, and it's on YouTube and it's had lots of traffic. This year what we did was, by popular demand, we brought back that campaign, and we added reflect. So it was just notice, listen, and reflect. And some of the posters that we sent to the schools and workplaces might have included, the reflect posters might have said something like, you know, what did you learn from a mistake you made? Or can you make a list of 5 things that make you smile? So that's the conversations, and there's also facilitative guidebooks that are sent to the work locations and to the schools to have conversations about our stigma reduction campaign. The second, I think, really sorry, can you flip back? The other piece was, I just want to talk about briefly, was supporting, understanding, and building capacity, the Leader's Guide to Employee Mental Health. And what we did was we tried to make a toolkit. Our principals have lots of resources available to them, but we try to make toolkits that are really short and just provide them with information that they need at a glance. So what we did was we developed the resource toolkit for system leaders, and it was really meant to help them understand mental health, define mental health, mental illness, and resilience, so we were speaking the same common language, to understand the impact of mental health challenges at our board, to recognize the signs of mental illness in employees, to know where to direct staff with mental health issues, to support employees with mental health issues. But I think that the last 2 pieces are important as well, which was to inform, educate staff on mental health at work, and to reduce stigma and build support amongst colleagues. So we gave them access to some videos, some resource materials that they may want to incorporate into their staff meetings. Okay, next. Just really briefly, the Developing Mentally Healthy Environments aim to provide resources to assist staff in their workplaces. We worked again with our community partners to offer fitness discounts and recreation discounts, because as a public sector organization, obviously we can't subsidize those things, but our size also gets us buying power. We offer workshops for staff, and they may be internally serviced, or they may come through our EAP provider. And lastly, on creating collaborative care pathways, the teams offered resources to assist employees in understanding their need with a goal to obtain proper health care. And the examples, again, I've given you are just really staff-based, but there are programs and resources that were developed to support our students. So next. So continuing our journey, I mean, this past year we've been part of a discussion group with the School Boards Cooperative, which is a cooperative of school boards within the province, on implementing the psychological health and safety standard. And that's something that we'll be working on putting a plan in place over the summer with a goal to start launching in the fall and in the new year. We're currently looking to pilot the Guardian Minds at Work survey and modifying our own system staff survey. Next. So we will continue to develop strong partnerships with our unions, federations, health providers, and community partners. As I mentioned, we work intricately or very extensively with members from many different groups, both internal and external to the board. We'll continue to find opportunities to align staff well-being initiatives with the work being done to support student well-being, because that has probably been our most successful model. We have had an interest in peer-to-peer support and establishing this kind of program. This is something we're going to explore, and we're very interested in it. It's just rather complex in terms of how to implement that in a system of our size, given the complexity and given the need for confidentiality. And next is really some resources I think that have been developed or put together there for you to consider.
Thank you so much, Janet, and I have to say that I learned a lot that how you can approach mental health and address mental health of staff in such a systematic way that you've done. Also wanted to thank you for your time today and for sharing so honestly not only the work that you're doing to address it, but also some of the challenges that you saw in your environment which led to the impetus to actually do some of this work. So really want to thank you for your time, and I know that our audience right now is thinking about some questions either for myself or for you to ask. But while they do that, I wanted to inform you, Janet, that our audience, we speak to them on a monthly basis every Wednesday, last Wednesday of the month, and we talk about the national standard of Canada for psychological health and safety in the workplace. we bring in various topics around workplace mental health, but all in all tied towards the national standard. And while I know that your presentation was talking about the various ways of addressing mental health in the workplace, I wanted to inform the audience that really, if you look at some of the components that you are already implementing in your environment, they're not far away from what the national standard already talks about. And just to give you, the audience, a bit of a crosswalk, you mentioned that in order to start addressing staff mental health, you looked at your data, you looked at the story that your data was showing, and that's something that the standard does ask organizations to do. You also mentioned that in order to address mental health in the workplace, you worked at various levels of the organization, of the region. You worked at the trustees, directors level, you worked at the schools, departments level, and all of the levels created their strategies, their action plans that then they implemented. That is an approach that's very well taken into the standard. And you mentioned that you had piloted the Mental Health at Work Award with Excellence Canada. And just so our audience is also aware of that, the Mental Health at Work Award of Excellence Canada has been modeled on the standard itself. And I really, really do appreciate the sharing of information you gave us, Janet, around various ways that you engaged your employee base, whether it was through the EFAP program services that you offered, whether it was through trainings or campaigns or videos or fitness programs. As I mentioned earlier, there is no health without mental health. Physical health is a key component as well of mental health, and you are taking a holistic approach to health of your staff. So really do want to thank you for that. And with that, maybe we'll take the first question, that are there particular peer-to-peer training models that you were considering? Maybe this is a question for you, Janet.
Yeah, right now we're still in the exploratory stage. We're not really sure what we're looking at. I mean, we've heard comments, we've done some research, but I wouldn't be able to comment on particular models.
Okay. I think there's another question around factors such as workload management or work-life balance. How has the York Region District School Board addressed that for their staff?
Well, work-life balance is a challenge. I mean, it's a challenge in any environment, right? I think that it really comes down to leadership, and it comes down to having the conversation, looking where you can at the structure of work. So, in some jobs that's a lot easier to do than in other jobs in terms of the tasks that folks have been assigned, in terms of, can you bring in some resources to assist. But I think when you've got, in some of our teaching jobs and some of our educational assistant positions, it's very challenging because there's many very high needs students in our schools, and some of those positions, what we're looking at doing is, can we rotate the care that's provided so that we avoid student burnout, or staff burnout, sorry.
Right.
That's one of the things we're looking at. We've looked at providing courses in terms of care for some of our folks in the system who are caregivers themselves in the roles that they provide. So we've done a lot of that kinds of training, especially with our psych services staff and some of our really high needs, programs working with our autistic children. We've provided that support to our staff members. And so I think that it really depends on the job, and I think it really comes down to the leadership in the building and the leadership having conversations with their staff.
Right. Absolutely. And conversation is a huge component of mental health and promoting mental health in a workplace. It's not something that you can put a ladder up or put a ramp in the organization and be done with it. This is a conversation, and it's sometimes a really great conversation starter, especially if you're a unionized environment. And I have a question here around, as a union representing members in the workplace and covered by the collective agreement, how can we be effective in persuading the employer to pay more attention? And what can the union do, what can the employer do, and how can that conversation be started and promoted?
I think that's a good question. I think that you need to look for opportunities where opportunities already exist. So, for example, I don't know the structure of that person's environment, but in our case, we have, you know, we have monthly joint occupational health and safety committee meetings with a variety of committees, and we have the health and safety reps that are out in all of our buildings. I think that at the health and safety committee meetings, for example, one can talk about the health and safety standard, right? The psychological health and safety standard. There's an opportunity to have those conversations. In terms of at labor management meetings, right, in terms of sometimes there might be conflict going on at a particular location or concerns expressed with someone's supervisory style. I mean, that might be conversations there. I know when we look at our labor relations data, or if we're working with one of our unions and we're looking on we have a respectful workplace policy and procedure, but if we're working on a respectful workplace complaint, that might be opportune time to, you know, dialogue about, you know, what can we do, how does this fit with the standard, how does this fit with workplace wellness, and how do we create an environment where people can thrive?
Absolutely. And maybe if we can shift gears, I'm getting a lot of questions around data and whether you have seen did you see the data on long-term disability or short-term disability of the leaders of the organization? Because I'm getting a comment saying principals are very stressed as well. But also, through your initiatives and through the various ways you've addressed this, have you seen any improvements in claims and trends and data at all?
That could take me a long time to answer. We do see principal data. They're just not in the OTIP book of business. They're insured through OPC, Ontario, right? So they're not in that. They're not in OTIP. They're with OPC. But through our disability case managers, we probably service over 1,200 to 1,300 employees a year. So what we have seen, we track it by union group, and we also run reports in terms of by primary diagnosis or if we know it. And so those people many of them may transition onto LTD, but many of them don't. I mean, they successfully recover, they successfully reintegrate in the workplace with the case manager's support and, of course, their federation support. Have we seen, I don't know how many of you are from school boards or know what's happened with school boards, but 2 years ago, I mean, the sick leave structure totally changed by way of the provincial government, and so that's really skewed any of our sick leave data. The plan is entirely different, and quite frankly, in many cases, has provided folks with more sick leave than they had. Not always. I mean, it's a little bit more complex than that. But so the sick leave data has been really skewed because of the changes. So it's very hard for us to see changes in our sick leave data. With regards to our LTD, I mean, one of the things we've seen with one of our groups has been an increase, and we've put, well, it's an older group. It's an older, we look at age and demographics as well, and it's a very different group. It's a predominantly older male group, and we've put some specific strategies in place to help that group in terms of their physical health based on the data we saw. So we're hoping that that's going to have some impact in terms of their LTD rates and their absenteeism as well.
And thank you for sharing that. And I must say that whenever we have thought about the standard or working with organizations that are implementing the standard, absolutely it is a work in progress. It's a continually improving framework, and it takes time. So even if you're not going to see any specific hard data improvements at the moment, you will see that as time goes by, because that's the hope of addressing mental health in the workplace. That's the hope of changing culture and being inclusive and being respectful to one another. So even though those data are not, are not showing something right away, that's something that's the hope to happen in, say, 3 years or so. So thank you for sharing that. And we have another question around the role, what a teacher can do. So there's a person asking our question, how would you recommend a teacher go about beginning this conversation and moving forward when an administrator doesn't support it or doesn't want you to reach out for support? And this question probably speaks a lot to the stigma, a lot to the lack of awareness of understanding mental health concerns and problems. So what would your comment be on this, Janet?
I guess my question would be, or my statement would be, it depends on what the teacher's referring to. If the teacher's referring to his or her own mental health or physical health, then I think they could access resources that are provided by the employer, the school board in our case, which might be EAP, which would be our disability management program, which would be our human resources staff. If it's not their principal, is there anyone else, their lead teacher, is there anyone else supportive in their environment? If you're talking more on a system level base in terms of trying to get, I guess, the whole infrastructure in terms of talking about resiliency and mental health, then they're obviously represented by a bargaining unit. And so I think their bargaining unit is their voice, and the bargaining unit should be bringing that forward. So whether they're ETFO or OPSU or, elected.
That's right. And we do have a comment agreeing with you to say that sick leave and collective bargaining have been a significant challenge to negotiate while rolling out the standard. And once again, it could be a conversation starter, something to continue to have a conversation put on the agenda for, so it becomes norm to talk about this. And if we think about physical health and safety standards or guidelines or legislations, we had to come along for many years trying to perfect that system before we felt comfortable and it became normal process. And that's something that we'll have to start to chip away at as years go by. And this is something new to Canada, but also something for all of us to be proud of, because Canada is leading the way for the rest of the world in this area, as the standard is the first of its kind that has been developed in the world. So something for us to think about and feel that we are progressing in the right direction, and for all of us to play a key role in it. And shared responsibility is a huge part of what Janet already mentioned as part of their strategy as well.
Can I just comment? I can see the person has typed in that they're referring to the mental health of the entire staff. I mean, one of the options there is, I mean, I don't know who the administrator or what negative reaction they're getting, but we need system leaders. Leadership roles don't necessarily have to be the principal or vice principal. When we started this journey, I can think of one elementary school in particular was doing amazing things. I have a T-shirt that they produced as part of their work, and it says, no teacher left on their behind. Was right when there was the campaign right in the States of no student left behind, no teacher left on their behind. And they did a wonderful Wellness Wednesdays, but it was not the administration. It was probably a handful of teachers at that school that just were passionate, and they did amazing things. They were probably one of the leaders that we featured. We do, the director sends out a weekly communication to all schools and workplaces where they highlight work being done, and this school was always being highlighted because they were doing such neat things with the students and with the staff. So, and the administrator I'm sure went along and whatever, but I think that people need to say, well, we can't wait for somebody else who can lead this. And we have caretakers in some of our schools that are leading these initiatives because that's their passion. So if you have a passion, then I would encourage you to explore what you can do within your work environment.
Absolutely, and thank you for sharing that. That's true not only just in the education sector, but we have found that to be both important and true in all sectors and industries where champions can bud out from various levels within the organization, can have an impact, as it's the role of the champion to really raise awareness and also continue to build that buy-in, whether it's with your colleagues, whether it's with your leadership group. It doesn't have to be starting from top down. We have seen examples of it starting from bottom up as well, so something to keep in mind. There's another question around critical for employers to empower staff to do just that. And sorry, I don't think it's a question, but it's definitely kudos to you, Janet, and your group to empower your staff to take on these initiatives. So really does, I think Patricia really does highlight sort of the sentiment that we have here at the Commission as well for the work that you're doing and for the leadership that your group and all of the levels of leadership as well as staff are showing, and enthusiasm that you're showing to be promoting mental health together. So thank you so much. And I don't believe we have any more questions. So with that, we would like to inform you of our next upcoming webinar, which will be on June 29th at noon, as and want to hear a little bit more about the healthcare sector. So that webinar will focus on the healthcare sector. And once again, we want to hear from you. Please do fill out the survey that you see as soon as you hit close on the screen. You'll see a survey pop up. The survey does help us develop more and more webinar content and tailor the webinars to your needs. So please do help us fill those out. And with that, I would like to say thank you to York Region District School Board, and on behalf of the Commission, thank you for your time, and we'll see you next month.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.